These are the imperialism slides. Nationalism and imperialism. The nationalism definition is advocate for political independence for a country who shares the same heritage. That means that people in the United States, or say of German descent, they want the German people to be furthered, and they know that they are the best. Imperialism definition. Nation extends its political, economic, and military control over weaker territories. Now, why does this lead, or nationalism lead to imperialism? That is because once you think that your country is set, you want to, show off how good and how big you are. Motives for imperialism: industrialization, social Darwinism, and paternalism. Industrialization, need for raw materials. An example would be rubber, petroleum, magnesium, steel, or palm oil. Now, if you want to take a look, think about Seattle. Seattle, as we get more industrialized, we need rubber for our tires to get into the city. We need petroleum to fuel our cars, and we need magnesium for steel to go ahead and build those skyscrapers for jobs. Social Darwinism. The original intent of social Darwinism, or Darwinism, would be species, survival of the fittest. That means that if you are a species of something, and you, like a bird, and your beak is too small to get the nectar or get some sort of food, you would die out. Imperialism. Interpretation of Darwinism. Nation, survival of the fittest. That means that they competed, or competition politically, economically, socially, and militarily. Whoever has the biggest and best military is going to win. Whoever has the best economy is going to win. Paternalism. Westerners, or Europeans specifically, believed that other less developed countries, African tribes, were like children and needed guidance. Basically, they were too stupid to guide themselves, whereas they thought that they were the adult in the room. Types of imperialism: direct, indirect, protectorate, sphere of influence. Direct imperialism. European power would directly rule the newly acquired land, impose culture, belief that the host country couldn't rule itself. Now, this kind of comes in with the paternalism. Hey, you guys are too dumb to do this. We're going to go ahead and take over. It's commonly used by France. Indirect imperialism. European power would inflict its will on local rulers. Local governors still have some authority, but must serve imperial power. The goal was to educate host countries and royalty/leading class in Western ways. The idea for this was to keep them in charge, so you kind of have a invisible hand moving them in the direction you want them. This was commonly used by Britain. Protectorate imperialism. European country would protect colony and advise local rulers on trade and missionary activity. The benefit: much cheaper for European countries unless colony is at war. Also, colony gets some freedom. This was used by all of them, but not necessarily used all the time. The point of this was that, one, it was cheaper, but two, you still get a ton of benefits from this, and they feel somewhat happy with that extra freedom. Sphere of influence imperialism. European powers claim exclusive investment and trading privileges over a given area. This was commonly used by all European powers, and specifically, as you can see the picture, in China. Each European power, in a sense, chose a port or chose a region that they got to influence in China. Other places could kind of come in, but they had the power. In reality, China had no power and was very weak at this time. Effects of imperialism: political, social, and economical. Political effects. Europeans enforced their laws on colonies. Some saw those laws as unfair. This is a con. But in doing this, these laws brought peace from local wars, seeing as those rules were there for, a specific reason. Another con: political boundaries were drawn that didn't reflect natives living there. So, for example, you might divide somewhere right in the middle of Lake Stevens, whereas we're sitting there and saying, hey, we're actually a community. If you want to divide somewhere, divide in between Lake Stevens and Snohomish. They also raised taxes on colonies and expensive to run. You need to pay for all those people who are in charge and running that stuff. Economic effects. The cons, colonies were used for raw materials and cash crops. Colonies became dependent on industrial Europe, destroyed local businesses. So now that they have that taste of all these new things, whether it be clothes that was made or manufactured quickly, they had to go ahead and go with Europe or the European countries because now they have this need. It's like a drug. Now, the pro was building roads, railroads, and telegraph systems so that they could get their things faster and more efficiently. And of course, this created more jobs. Social effects, cons. Impressed with new technologies, natives were converted to Christianity by missionaries. Now, this can be a con because it can disrupt the groups of people. Obviously, if you're a Christian or you want to see these people in some different religion, this would be a pro. Now, a pro to this would be public health care was provided. In providing this public health care, it lessens sicknesses as we have all sorts of different technologies and advancements in health that they did not have. And then another con was native culture lost. Of course, once you start adding another culture in, you're going to start losing the one you had before. Now, pro to this was education provided for all children. Now, they get to be educated, not saying that the education was the best education, but they do learn to read and write and therefore converse in different ways. So they can actually record their own language and they can record other things from there. You guys can see it looks like they're going up these things to civilization. The Zulu, that's in Africa. You have India, China, Egypt, and up at the top there. You can see they're carrying them up, the vice, brutality, slavery, cannibalism, taking them away from all these different things that they had, the ignorance, and trying to bring them up to civilization. This, of course, was, a drastic change, but also was kind of seen as somewhat negative. Not that slavery is a positive, but they did go ahead and say they were ignorant, when in reality, a lot of these groups of people were very smart. They just were not smart or had the specific advancements that the European civilization had. Now that we've finished, I have some questions for you. You guys are going to go ahead and read or listen to The White Man's Burden. These questions will be answered once you've finished The White Man's Burden. There'll be a document on there. What the first question for White Man's Burden is, what do you think Kipling's true motive is in writing this poem? Is it racial dominance, or was he genuinely interested in helping others? Could he have had another aim in mind? How can you tell? Question number 2. Is the speaker more concerned about the native people or the white men? How do you know? Question 3. How does the poem describe the native locals? Are there any positive descriptions? If so, where? If not, why not? Question 4. Some have read this poem as sarcastic, an indictment of imperialism rather than a celebration of it. Do you agree with that reading? Why or why not? Question number 5. How does the poem's regular rhyme scheme and meter affect its message?